Got Angel Collinson on the Do Hard Things podcast, and I'm excited for this one and to hear some of your story. I would love to give listeners some context for who you are, and I think the best way to do that is to ask, like, when people ask you what you do, how do you answer that question?
Ooh, well, first of all, thanks for having me on.
Yeah.
Really, yeah, psyched to be here. Just the title itself has been something that, like doing hard things has been something that I realize a lot of my life has kind of revolved around. And my friends are always like, that's just part of your medicine, is like showing people that you can do hard things and in various different ways. So right now I'm in the middle of a sort of identity shift, I guess. I was going to say existential crisis, and I'm like, no, it's not a complete existential crisis. It's maybe a minor one.
Yeah.
I used to be a professional skier, like a big mountain skier I skied since I was 2, and I had a decade doing big mountain skiing, as a film skier, and got to travel around the world and had a really successful career. And it was so awesome. And then about a year ago exactly, I announced my retirement. And during the time of prepping to retire, I bought a sailboat and learned how to sail. And so currently I'm sailing around the world with my partner Pete. But as far as like, who am I and what do I do? I don't really have a great answer for that currently, because I wouldn't say I'm a skier. I wouldn't say I'm a sailor. I'd say, I guess, that I'm just like a human being currently trying to figure out what it is that I do right now.
Yeah, you're in the in-between right now.
I'm in the in-between. Yeah.
So are you comfortable being in the in-between, or is it kind of a like
no?
Is
anyone comfortable in the in-between?
There's probably somebody. Yeah, I don't know.
If you know them, if you'd give me their number, that would be amazing. It's so squirmy in the in-between, at least for me. There's like moments where you're like, oh, I'm killing it. Like, I'm sailing around the world. I'm doing this thing, this life dream that I work really hard to make happen. And then there's also moments where I'm like, but I know this isn't it, and what's next? And, it's like a lifestyle that's really like the highs are high and the lows are low. And so there's definitely plenty of low moments where you're like, what the hell am I doing with my life? And where do I want to take this? And like, there's a multitude of those, but overall, it's really awesome. It really teaches you how to, I guess, be present and like enjoy where you're at, because it's really hard not to when you're in these places. You're just like, wow, the engine might be broken and the boat might be falling apart, but the spot that we're at is very cool.
Yeah, no kidding. I would imagine too that, like, you quit this thing that had been your entire life's pursuit, being a skier. And there's probably a lot of things you could have done to just like throw yourself into them that would have been a lot busier. And not to say that, owning a boat and sailing around the world isn't busy, but there's probably a lot more time to just think and process and consider that being in the in-between.
Yeah.
Was that on purpose?
No. No, I sort of like, I was ready to be done skiing for a while, but I didn't want to leave without a good lily pad of where I was going next. And when I met my boyfriend, really quickly, we were like, I didn't know how to sail, but he did. And he's like, I'd love to teach you how. And I was like, yeah, cool. And he's like, no, I'm serious. I was like, me too. And really quickly, we were like, let's do the buy the sailboat and sail around the world thing, which we did. And for a while, I was trying to figure out how to make both skiing and sailing work. And I was like, is it seasonally that I split them up? Like, how do I do this? Do I try and get my ski sponsors to like sponsor the sailing expeditions? Do we make film projects out of them? There was like a long in between of trying to figure out how to like mesh the two sort of chapters. And then I just realized that I was swimming upstream and it wasn't flowing, it wasn't working. And I was like, okay, I think I just need to just fully jump ship, so to speak. And it wasn't like a premeditated, I'm gonna quit skiing, how should I do it, I'm gonna buy a sailboat. It was more like, I want to quit skiing, but I don't know how. Ooh, let's buy a sailboat. Oh, I guess I should quit skiing now.
It was like your commitment device. You bought the boat and you had to like commit at that point.
Yeah. Well, and I was so fired up on it, and it was like the spark that I felt for working on the boat and for learning how to sail was there, and I didn't have that with skiing. So it was pretty easy to be like, no, it's really important that I pursue this thing. But yeah, what you said about having reflection time is really astute, because there are moments when the lifestyle is actually a lot of work and it's pretty busier than you think, but there are ample times, especially when you're on passage, where you're just looking at the ocean for 3 weeks pretty much, where you're like, I have a lot of time to ponder. Yeah.
Have you surprised yourself with some of the thoughts and things you've like maybe been considering in this season, or are you like, this is kind of what I was already thinking before, and just mulling over the same things over and over?
No, I would say I've been profoundly changed, by this chapter. And I think I don't even fully understand all of the ways that I've changed yet, because I'm still in it, but I bet you in about a year or 3 years, I'll be able to tell you how. Right now, all I know is that I'm different and I feel different. And some of the things of this lifestyle I enjoyed a lot more than I thought I would, and others were a lot harder for me than I was anticipating. And so already I'm realizing that like there was an open-ended sort of, we didn't set a timeline on the sailing chapter. We were just like, we know when it's going to be time to quit, and we'll know when it's time to change things up. And actually, like right now, I'm in the middle of realizing, okay, I need to change something up again. And it feels soon, but also not. We've been sailing around on living aboard for like a year and a half. And so I'm trying to figure out how to balance having a bit of a stability on land somewhere to recharge, and then also being able to keep the boat and sail it for a chunk of the year. So I don't know what it looks like, but I really wasn't anticipating already being here and being like, actually, I need more stability. Because I've always been a vagabond. But so I guess, like, to come back to your question though, what has surprised me is when we put ourselves through these really hard things. Like I'd never sailed offshore before, which is just when you're
can't see
land, especially like offshore sailing will be when a couple 100 miles, or when you're pretty far away from any piece of land. And I'd never sailed offshore before, and we sailed across the Atlantic. Was my first offshore passage. Oh which so it's kind of like a full
significant
send. And I wasn't sure how I was going to feel. I'd never not seen land. I was like, am I going to freak out? Like, what's it going to be like? But, I had a pretty good like idea of what it was going to be like. And it kind of surprised me how natural it felt. And just moving into the whole sailing lifestyle was like, it felt a lot more easeful in a lot of ways than I was expecting, and also harder in some ways, which I know is really vague, but like the things of like being in the middle of the ocean and like putting yourself through, the rigmarole of like being on a crazy sleep schedule and going on watches and sort of managing that, I don't know, life at sea was a lot easier than I thought it was going to be, probably because of the life in the mountains and expeditions and doing that sort of a thing.
You hadn't lived like a comfortable normal life up to that point, so you learn how to adjust and adapt.
Like I already sort of have a certain my parents this comes from my parents. We grew up, my dad was a ski patrol, and we lived up at Snowbird in the employee housing, and then in the summers he would pick us up, him and my mom, in this old 1979 Ford Econoline van that was just a piece of work and was always breaking down. And so we would travel around the West living out of that for the summer months and backpacking in the high alpine. And so my parents always prided themselves on helping us learn how to be comfortable being uncomfortable. And so that actually has really served me in like a lot of ways, I think, in my life.
How much did you maybe you liked it, but how much was there a tension with your parents of like, I don't want to learn this right now, and then like now being grateful that they like forced you to do that?
Yeah, definitely. There was quite a bit of resentment on my part growing up. I'm like artistically inclined and more socially inclined than the rest of my family. Like still to this day, I'm very social, I'm very creative, and the rest of my family's a little more reclusive. They really love like being out in the mountains for long periods of time. And I'm like, I want to learn instruments and go to the ocean. And so I'm sort of the black sheep. But so yeah, there was a lot of sort of childhood desires that went unmet, but it was just, that was our life and that was what we did. And, you know, I love being out in nature so much. So that was always the sort of salve, I guess. And now, of course, like you said, have a massive appreciation for all of the skills and life lessons that I got from that chapter.
Yeah, you're doing so many, or you have done and are doing so many things that so many people want to do, myself included. Like, I love being outdoors in the mountains, and that's part of why, you know, I live where I live. And you know, my wife makes fun of me for how much I say I love the ocean, but I say it all the time because I love the ocean, and like it would be so cool to sail around. And like, I don't know, it's just a really cool life, an opportunity that you have. And you know what's cool, I even just talking to you is realizing it's not like, it's amazing, but it comes with the less glamorous parts too, right? And there's things that you lose in pursuing certain lifestyles. So
always. It's like, I also think about, you know, we think that, oh, I'd be able to do all this stuff if I had all this money, or, you know, if I was famous, all these things would line up for me. But like, they have to give, like the rich and famous have to also give up a lot. Like, they can't just walk into a grocery store, or if you have a lot of money, you know, your social interactions are totally different. Like, are they friends with me because of my money? Or like, you know, just your relationships change. And so I think that there's, no matter like what our dreams are and what like the thing that we sort of put on a pedestal or idealize is, you like, at least in my life, I've gotten to a lot of these things that people sort of have pedestalized, and I get there and I'm like, damn, this is actually super hard still. Like you just
not as good as a
different set of problems. Like the rewards are high and it's awesome and worth it, and then also it comes with its equal set of problems. Like, I don't necessarily think anything is way, I don't know, I always think of it as like there's no such thing as a free lunch.
No, there is a cost to everything, and sometimes we just aren't able to even fully consider the full cost before you get there. It's like,
totally.
You just don't have a frame of reference for it.
No, and you can't. And that, I mean, I think that's part of like the beauty of life is just going for it and finding yourself in new situations and being like, okay, well, that was anticipated. What do I do now?
No kidding. So I want to go back to something you said earlier. You said like you'd been thinking about quitting skiing for a while. But then, you know, you hit that point where you bought the boat and it was like, well, I guess I can't make it work to do both. So I'm going to just fully commit here. Like, how long was a while? How long were you, because you said you started skiing when you were 2 to, I don't know how old you were when you quit, but a long time, your life. So how long were you like in the process of letting go basically of that part of your identity and wrestling through that?
So basically, I started skiing when I was 2 and then started skiing professionally when I was 20 and then quit when I was 30. But I would say probably when I was like 26 was when I was like, okay, I'm kind of over the skiing thing. Like, I'm ready for a way out. But I was also kind of right at the peak of my career. And so I wasn't just going to walk out right then, but I was kind of looking for an exit strategy. And so I sort of had I had like, you know, 4 years of being like, okay, I'm kind of over this and still doing it, to really just get me emotionally prepared to leave. So by the time my exit strategy came out, I was like, let's go.
You've been considering it,
I've been considering it for a while, but then I sort of like with it's like, I don't know, I describe it like a breakup, a long-term or like a long-term relationship.
You've been in a long relationship.
You've been in a long relationship, and then and you've been anticipating the breakup for probably too long. And then, but when the time actually comes and you do the breakup, you're still heartbroken afterwards. You're still like, oh, but remember how they would do this thing, and remember when we would do that, and like there's that sort of melancholic phase of grieving. I had that more than I was anticipating, which was beautiful. So yeah, definitely still kind of struggled. And then after that, you know, being like, oh wait, I pretty much suck at so many things in life because I've been so highly specialized in skiing and like mountain stuff that like, I mean, I don't know how to surf. I don't really like, I'm not a great cook. There's all these things just because of my lifestyle and all of the travel and all the special, like, you know, specialization, that I was like a complete beginner at so many things in life. And so, and then also having to let go of my identity and being like, well, I guess I'm not like the badass skier anymore. I'm just this chick who has to learn everything.
Yeah. I'm just normal.
I'm just normal. But I mean, it sounds really egotistical when I say it that way. And it was definitely like battling my ego and really just being like, I'm me and that's awesome. And I don't have to have my ego attached to anything like perceivably cool that I've done. Like that stuff doesn't really matter. I remember we were mountain biking in Madeira along our journey. We sailed from Maine across the Atlantic to the Azores, these islands off the coast of Europe. And the Atlantic island chain has this island called Madeira that has like world-class enduro biking. We had no idea. I hadn't biked in a year or something. So we rented a bike and basically got, you know, shuttle like laps all over the island all day. It was amazing. And I was the weakest link by far. And I just found myself like justifying like, well, if only, because these guys were like fully kitted out. It like they had flown with their bikes. Like it was a destination. This was their thing. They were really good at it. And I was thinking of like on heli trips, you know, if somebody was to fly in and they didn't really know how to ski that well, it would be the equivalent. I was like the weakest link, you know, that person who like couldn't really ski that well on a heli trip that was me. And I was thinking to myself like, oh, if only they knew that I was like, I used to do some cool stuff, then maybe they wouldn't be looking at me like that. But then I was like, who cares? Like, why do I need to justify that I'm cool because I used to do this other thing that they might think is cool? It was just a really interesting like thought and identity experiment, and really just letting go of the things that define you that you think give you worth.
I wanted to ask you before we dive into kind of like the central question of the podcast, which is the hardest thing in your life. I wanted to ask you what's like one of the coolest places you've been on the boat so far, like a highlight spot?
Yeah, I mean, Madeira was really cool. It was beautiful, just like very very lush, so many fruits, like so many flowers. It was a really cool island. Also the island Dominica in the Caribbean is like pretty low-key, pretty uninhabited, and super beautiful. I think those two have probably been my favorite so far.
Top two. Have you mostly just done I don't know where all you guys have gone. Have you mostly just stayed on the Atlantic coastlines?
Yeah. So we left from Maine, went across the Atlantic, down the island chain to the Canaries, which is kind of off the coast of Africa, and then back across to the Caribbean to Grenada, and then up the eastern side of the Caribbean chain to the tip of Florida, and then back down. And the boat's in Panama right now, but we kind of had to rush from Florida to Panama, so we skipped a lot of like that side of Latin America. But we're hoping to go through the Panama Canal. I'm not sure exactly when, and then out to the South Pacific. So
that's going to be so sweet.
Yeah, really excited to get out there. Although Latin America is also so cool, or Central America. Yeah.
There's lots of options for amazing places to go. Are you scuba diving at all?
No, not really. We just took some free diving courses though, and that's very, very cool. I'm scuba certified. Pete's not. We have some scuba gear on board, but it's sort of, I don't know, I would like to take a refresher course. You know, you can kind of mess your stuff up if you're not really refreshed. But free diving is really, really amazing. We've been super into that. Free diving and spearfishing. We're like kind of hooked.
So cool. Yeah. And I would strongly encourage you to do a refresher course. I skipped the refresher course and forgot how to clear my goggles. And I was like losing my mind underwater.
Oh, no. So,
yeah. It ended up being okay, but take the refresher course. First-hand experience. It's not fun. Okay. So, gosh, I want to ask you so many questions, but I'm just going to, for the sake of time, go to the central question for the podcast. And the reason that this podcast exists is to like encourage people. And one great place to encourage people is when they're in the middle of a really hard season. And we've just decided, for better or for worse, that people's stories are a really good way to do that, because they offer hope and perspective. Like it's hard to have those when you're in the middle of the valley, but if somebody can shine a light, like, hey, I've already walked this valley, and this is what's on the other side, like they can kind of like pull you out of that space a little bit. And so that's the goal, is that these stories would do that for people as they listen. So the way we've gotten at that is, what's the hardest thing in your life you wouldn't take back?
I just love that so much. I so believe in stories as like a powerful way to help us remember when we're in like the pit of despair, that somebody else has also been there, and that, the stories are the things that stick with us. So just really love that. I think probably the hardest thing that I wouldn't take back, that happened was when I was 20. My boyfriend at the time, we were both competing in these big mountain competitions, and he died in the competition that I was at in Kirkwood, California. And it was my first encounter with death. And I think like as a culture here in the US especially, we're not that great about talking about death or about talking about grieving. Like we don't really know what to do or what to say or how to be if someone's having a really hard time and dealing with a lot of grief. And so I really got to just like workshop all of that firsthand, and it was not pretty, obviously. Like it was freaking really awful for a while.
No kidding.
But I mean, I wouldn't take it back at all. It was probably the most profoundly transformative experience in my life for so many reasons. Like it really helped me face my own mortality, which I'd never really felt comfortable doing before. And it was such a gift being like, oh, right, like we're all gonna die. It's actually not so scary. It's just hard for all of us that are still here. So that was really beautiful, because I think as soon as we really make peace with, our death is when we really start to figure out how we want to live, and like in a true and deep way. And, you hear that from people that are diagnosed with, terminal illnesses. So it was so beautiful being like, all right, well, okay, we're going to bite the dust. It could be at any moment. And life is so crazy. Like, what do I actually want to be doing? And who do I want to be? Like, what's the kind of person I want to be? And so that was really just so helpful and really grew me as a person. And so I'm so grateful for that. But finding the way out of like the pit of despair that you find yourself in, grieving something really big, like the loss of someone, it's like gnarly.
I would love to hear a little bit of the story if you're able to share it. Of like how it happened, and even like, well, I'll just say my follow-up questions, but could you share a little bit of the story of like how that happened? And
it's kind of a crazy story.
Okay.
So we started dating. We hadn't been dating that long, like, I don't know, 6 months or something. So while we were still in the honeymoon phase, it was also like true love had struck. I was like, this guy is my person. And we had like the most epic winter together. Like we had all these powder days. We were traveling around like the epic resorts, and I was winning all these competitions. Like I was on cloud 9, and he was like, maybe I'll get your dad's approval if you keep winning, babe. Keep it up. Like, but so we just had this amazing connection, and he was like one of the most incredible people still to this day I've ever met. And so we were on cloud 9. Everything was awesome. And actually the night before he died, we hadn't told each other we loved each other yet, because I was like, I really want to take this thing slow. Like, I don't want to rush in. I don't want to like screw anything up. I really want to do this right. So we hadn't said that, but like the night before he died, he basically was like, like, I feel like I've been waiting for you my entire life, and I could die happy tomorrow. Like this, you have been this like puzzle piece that I feel like I'm looking for it, and I just couldn't be happier to have met you. And like,
Wow.
I'm just so stoked to know you. And it was this really sweet, basically like profession of our love for each other.
Yeah.
And how complete he felt in his life. Like he was just talking about how happy he was in his life, and that it felt very complete. And then the next day, you know, the women went first, I went, and then the men were going. I was watching in my binoculars. He threw this like huge 60-foot backflip, stomped it right to his feet, and then crumpled to the ground. I couldn't figure out what went on, but they, you know, had to get patrol there, and turned out he landed on some rocks under the snow, and so suffered some pretty massive internal injuries. And he got life flighted out from there, straight from Kirkwood, this resort, straight to the Reno hospital. And when I heard the helicopter keep going like past the local hospital, I was like, oh no, you know, because they took the stretcher right, or the toboggan right to the helicopter. So I never got to like talk to him or like it was hard to get any intel. So long story short, he's in the hospital. I'm trying to figure out if I should just ditch the competition. There's one more day, or if I should keep going. And, you know, I can't sleep. I'm like, can't keep food down. I'm so nauseous. And I'm like, you know, what would Ryan want me to do? I know he's in a coma. He might not make the night. We don't know. But what would he want me to do? And I knew without a doubt that he would want me. It was like a very important competition for the season. It was like the qualifier for the world champs. I was like, he would for sure want me to go ski this run like for him. So I think if I hadn't asked myself that question, I probably just would have gone to the hospital, you know. But he was out. He was like out cold. And so I was like, I'm gonna do this for him. So the next day skied my run, ended up winning the competition, and then I drove straight to the hospital. And I don't know if anyone else listening has had this experience where people that are dying or have died communicate with you in birds of prey. But on this drive, I saw like hundreds of hawks, like so many. I called my mom and I was like, Mom, I know you're into that like weird tarot stuff. Like you have that Egyptian card deck. What does the hawk mean again? And she was like, it means, you know, clear vision and new perspectives. And like, why? And I was like, well, I just saw like hundreds of hawks. And she's like, I literally pulled that card like 5 minutes before you called. So I go to the hospital. I'm like, so many hawks on this whole, like it was insane.
Like a weird amount of hawks.
Like a weird amount of hawks. And go to the hospital. He's like hanging in there. It's looking like he's gonna pull through. A bunch of his friends fly in. He had like 10 friends fly in. His parents had flown in. So I'm hanging with his parents and things are looking good. We all go to bed, and then the hospital calls us and they're like, we need you to come. And actually maybe this was the hardest thing I've ever had to do. So all the friends had gone home. It's like 3 a.m. They call us back to the hospital. I'm with his parents. They haven't slept. They haven't eaten. They're doing awful. His dad's like kind of like passing out at the table. Like he needs blood sugar. So I'm like trying to get him to drink some orange juice. And his mom's just like, his dad like isn't super with it. And the doctor comes and sits us down and is like, all right, here's the deal. Like he went into cardiac arrest. We were able to resuscitate him. He's got a really strong heart, but he's bleeding out. He has too many vascular tears in his hip area, and his heart's going to keep stopping, and we can keep like getting it going again. But at some point, you know, like we just got to quit trying. And his dad's like, kind of like not non-responsive. And I'm like worried about him. His mom's worried about him. And she just looks over at me with the doctor there. And she was just like, I mean, what do you think? And I was like, whoa, well, and I was
20
like,
years old.
Yeah, I was 20. And I was like, you know, everyone here has done an amazing job. The nurses were amazing. The doctors were amazing. I was like, I think it's his time. Like I think it's his time to go. And she was like, okay. And she was like, well, let's do one more. Like if his heart stops, let's do one more and just hope for a miracle. And so that gave enough time for like all of his friends to rush to the hospital. And then we all just like put our hands on him, or they resuscitated him once more while people were getting there. And then after that, they just unplugged all of the alarms and stuff. So if his heart quits like if his heart stopped, it wouldn't be like
peaceful.
beep.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so we all just had our hands on him and yeah, helped him transition. And it was like so sad and also so beautiful and so sacred, you know. It's like we never want that to happen, but it is a part of life, and being able to like surround somebody that you care about so much with a bunch of his most loved ones and be like, all right, buddy, like till the next time if there is one, was really profound. And yeah, and then then I was like, all right, what do I do now? I slept for like 3 hours or a little more than that, but then I had to drive home across the West Desert to Salt Lake, and then I had like competitions the rest of that season. That was the 1st of March, and then I had like 3 more competitions, and yeah, it was kind of blurry, but just like I just like would think of him every time. I'm like, okay, buddy, this is for you. And that was sort of my way of also healing. And yeah, I did really well. But it wasn't about that, you know.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing the story. I personally haven't experienced a lot of death. My grandma just passed away, and that was kind of like the first, and I wasn't even that close. Like I wasn't there, you know, it like, but it caused me to like think through that. And I can imagine now, I couldn't before, but I can imagine now, like what it would be like to process that with somebody that you're much closer with or present with, and in an unexpected way, even like she's 90, you know, it was kind of like her time. She's 20 years old. And unexpectedly. So it's, you make it like you're farther removed from it now, but I'm sure there was a lot of emotion involved in that like season for sure.
Yeah, it was I mean, it took a long time. It's been 11 years now. So it's quite, or gosh, almost 12. But yeah, it definitely took a lot of years to, I don't know if heal is the right word, but it took definitely a few years before it didn't feel sharp, because there's like this sensation like when that happens, especially I think if you're like, if you just love them so deeply, if they're so close, it feels like this part of you is just like ripped open. Like it's so, the loss and just knowing like there's nothing you could do to get them back, and you miss them so terribly. It's really hard to describe. And it took a while. And also I was like, I'm never going to find that deep of a love again. Like there it goes. Like, God damn it. And yeah, so there's just like every death, every relationship has its own little, you know, hole that it rips open. But then I also believe that, you know, there's profound healing that happens, and like, yes, there's a scar, but I just love that saying. I forget who it is, but our hearts grow stronger at the broken places. I think it's Mother Teresa.
I wish I could fill it in for you, but I don't know who said that.
I want to say it might be Mother Teresa, but
well, my favorite artist, Switchfoot, says the scars or the wounds are where the light shines through. So
yes, I love Switchfoot.
So there you go. That's basically Mother Teresa saying that, I guess. So, in the music world. You know, you had that rest of the season to go through, and I would imagine, you know, with the lifestyle that you had, you weren't like anchored into a specific community necessarily where you could kind of process it with people. I'm sure there are people kind of moving around with you. So how like alone or not alone were you to process and work through everything during that time?
Well, I was really grateful for my family. I spent a lot of time with my family during that time. That was super helpful. I got to be really good friends with his friends and did a lot of trips with them, and that was really helpful in healing. He was also really loved like in the ski community, and so there was bits of connection here or there. But I also just have found so much of my healing actually from being alone in nature. So it's like this balance of not isolating. It's still connecting and still like letting your broken parts be loved back to light, but also being alone in nature has always been like one of the most healing experiences. So yeah.
Yeah. So it was a mixture, and you had, sounds like, the opportunity when you needed it as a social person to like get that community and reminder and different perspective, or just other people are still here. And then also to like just process or not have to deal with it at all. Whatever it was that you needed necessarily. What do you remember, like what your prevailing feeling was, maybe 2, 3, 4 months afterwards? Was it peace? Was it confusion? Was it, like, I'm going to go do these things for you, purpose? Like, do you remember?
I felt pretty low and pretty stuck for probably like 6 months after. I remember at first I was just really sad and really just like, the question that was most helpful would be like, okay, I'd be catching myself doing something and not able to get out of the like little grief loop that I was in, the sadness loop, like crying on the couch or something when it was snowing outside. And I would often be like, okay, if Ryan is looking down on me right now, what do you think what would he say to me? Like, what's he thinking right now? And, I think it's really important to feel the grief and to let it rip you open for as long as you need to be ripped open for, and to feel it all, like, and not run away. I'm a big proponent of not running away from it. And also sometimes there's those moments when you have to figure out how to pick yourself up and just take a step forward. And in those would be the moments when I'm like, all right, what would Ryan do? What would he say to me right now? And what if he's looking down on me? What's he thinking to himself? And I'll be like, well, he definitely would not want me to be crying on the couch if he had his way. Like, he would definitely want me to be outside skiing or like, enjoying the fresh powder. So that question really helped when I was grieving a lot. And then I would say I entered into a really low period where I don't even think I realized how low I was. And I had, like, I'm a strong, positive person. I've always been that way. I've always had that reflected to me. And so during this time, I actually got the reflection a lot that the way that I was processing his death was really helping a lot of people in the community, and also other people that, had experienced recent losses. So I think that I thought that I was doing better than I was. Well, it wasn't that I was like, didn't know I was doing bad, but it's almost like when the screen light, like when you're on your laptop and you unplug it from the power source and the screen just automatically dims, and you don't actually realize, you don't actually realize that it's darker until one time you're like, oh, actually it can just go up like 30%. I sort of didn't realize that it was like, 30% darker until, actually, I don't know if this is something you want to put in, so you can cut it out if not, but I had this really profound mushroom experience by myself in the desert. And I don't know if it's something that you want to put in. I can elaborate if it is. Otherwise, that was like a really healing turning moment for me where everything changed.
Were you on your own?
Yeah.
So everything changed. That's a big statement. I haven't had that experience, so I'm asking genuinely, like, what happened? Like, how did everything change in your life from something like that?
Well, I guess if this does make the cut, disclaimer, do not recommend, going off and doing psychedelics, especially alone, especially outside. Like, I very much think that there's amazing research coming out for therapy assisted psychedelic healing for depression and PTSD. And it's very important to be in a safe setting with a person who's helping you process an experience, and you're in a comfortable place, you're well prepared. Like, there's so much that goes into preparing well for one of these experiences. So I don't recommend what I did to, as a disclaimer, if you're struggling, go do this. Okay. So now that we've got that disclaimer out of the way, I had recreationally, occasionally, or not occasionally, I would say semi-regularly, maybe once or twice a year, I would eat mushrooms in the desert, often by myself. It was a part of I would almost say coming of age. Like I would do these solo trips in the desert, and usually in the spring and fall, and mushrooms would be a part of it. And it was always a very spiritual experience for me. But after Ryan died, I was like, hell no, I'm not going to go do that. Especially, I'm not going to go do it by myself. You know, I don't know what I'm going to find. And so I went to the desert, didn't eat any mushrooms in the spring. And then I went in the fall, and I had this really healing experience where I wrote a letter to him for the first time. This was, I think, in October. He died in March. It was the first time I'd been able to write to him. I wrote letters to his family. I wrote letters to his sister. Like I just did a lot of the things that I just hadn't been able to do for some reason. And I was like, okay, actually, I think I'm ready. I'm ready to surrender and to just be in nature, in this place in nature, in the desert that I know so well, and take some of this medicine, because it's always been very therapeutic for me, but I was afraid for a good reason.
Yeah.
And so the experience that I had was like, it's hard. It was a very mystical experience. It's hard to put into words, but I basically was able to access this like level of grief that I just hadn't, like, I don't know if I had kind of numbed out before I got there, but like as soon as I started, feeling the mushrooms, my perception of my own being changed. And I was like, oh girl, you haven't actually gone there. And I just could feel the grief that was still in there. And I just started crying so hard, like just absolutely like body racking sobs.
Yeah.
But they felt right. It wasn't like, they didn't feel bad ever. And I just was like going there. I was like, oh God, this has been what has been in there the whole time. This is why I've been feeling bad. And then, it was the craziest thing, because I don't know how to describe it, but I could like feel him all around. And my iPod kept queuing up these songs that were his songs. Like all of these very cool things were happening. And I don't know how to describe it other than like, I could just feel him there. And I was like, okay, you're like, wherever I am, you're here too. And then something would happen. Like I'd see, lizards chasing each other or whatever, something would be funny. And I would just start like belly laughing, like laughing so hard, like from my gut. And I was like, oh my God, I forgot what it feels like to be this happy and to laugh like this. I hadn't laughed like that, since March. And I was like, oh, right. Like this is actually what it feels like to feel good. And, that for fear of hopefully not butchering it, basically, one of the reasons why psychedelics are so helpful is that they, help new neurons fire together that maybe have not fired together in a while. And so you can make new brain patterns basically they're like such a connective substance. And it was almost like my happy pathways reconnected. And I was like, okay, this is what I'm going for now. And it just helped me remember, and it really helped me access that part. And it also helped me have this spiritual experience of like, oh yeah, whatever happens to us, like we're somewhere. We're like, he was somewhere. He was definitely not just gone. And it kind of started me on my spiritual just exploration per se. But that, I would say, that feeling of being able to fully grieve and to fully remember what happiness felt like was so profound. So really grateful. Yeah, just like really grateful for that.
Yeah, it sounds like, and I don't know, this is me totally just interpreting what you just told me of, the psychedelics and the experience that you had, but it sounds like it like is an amplifier for what, we almost like alcohol, but totally different, of like what we bury inside. And it removes the inhibitors almost of like, and you're able to fully process almost or experience in a magnified way what you've been inhibiting for X, Y, and Z reason. And I don't know if that's actually the case, but that's what it sounds like.
Yeah, I would say my experience with them has been that I'm able to view myself in a very different way and from a very different light. And so it gives you like a workaround from maybe not the lies you've been telling yourselves, but like the stories that you've been living in. You can kind of like get outside of your stories and look in and be like, oh, I've been telling myself that the whole time. Like, that is silly. That is very silly.
Yeah.
Or like, oh wow, actually, yeah, I can see myself. There's a lot of grief in there. Like, it's almost like you're still very much in you, but you can see yourself from a very, very different perspective. That in my case has always been very helpful
Yeah.
in realizing some workarounds and some, yeah, maybe expression that needs to happen. Or yeah, yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, we
Mhm.
definitely need that. I remember, gosh, I don't remember what class it was. I was in college, and there was this concept that they were talking about called the Johari window. I don't know if you've ever heard of it before.
No.
And I hope I'm
Uh-uh.
saying it right. You know, it was in college, maybe. But
Yeah.
I think it was Johari window. And there's, if you imagine a window, there's 4 panes.
Okay.
And basically, like, our perception of ourselves exists in those 4 panes in different ways, or who we are. And one of them is like what we know about ourselves.
Hmm.
One of them is what and only we know about ourselves. One of them is what we and other people know about ourselves. One of them is what other people see in us or know about us. And then the fourth one is like the way they describe it is what God knows about us, or like what nobody has yet recognized, right?
Whoa,
And
cool.
like we need ways to like experience ourselves in all four of those to have a whole, to see the full picture.
Huh.
And it sounds like, you know, like what you're describing is helping fill in some of those window panes, and
Yeah.
probably that fourth one, like
Yeah.
what
It
nobody
almost seems like
knows.
you jump to the
Yeah.
fourth one for a brief minute in time. And then the insights or the way you see yourself from that fourth pane for that experience is, yeah, it's profoundly shaped my life for sure. Wow.
Hmm.
I love that. The Johari window. I'm going
I
to look
hope I'm
that up.
saying that right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Look
Yeah.
it up. I mean, you'll
Yeah.
probably, if you say 4 panes and
Yeah.
window, maybe, well,
Yeah.
actually that might not work. I don't know. I'll try to look it up too. But yeah, thanks for sharing that too. I'll put some disclaimer on if I feel like I need to, but you did a pretty good job. So I think it's, yeah, if it's for somebody, it's for somebody. We all need a way to get outside of ourselves, and like we're talking about, right? Like have that gift of perspective that we just can't summon up on our own. And
Yeah.
you know, for each person, there's different ways to do that, and a lot of times they're informed by worldview. But
Totally.
no, sometimes we just need people in our life, and sometimes we need just totally remove ourselves from those situations or comfort zones. And uh,
Totally.
yeah,
Yeah. There's
so
so many avenues to healing. Yeah.
yeah. So okay, back to this predominant emotion you experienced, which was, you know, sadness for a while. And
Yeah.
you said, you know, like you wouldn't take this back because it allowed you to process like death and your living. So
Hmm.
when you think back on that, you know, you said almost 12 years ago now, can you think of a couple times in your life where you had to make a decision and you can recall that this was like shaping how you made that decision?
Mm. Mm. I feel like there are. It might take me a second.
Yeah, take your time.
Um, yeah, well, I guess the first stories that I can think of all relate more to my relationships and telling people what I really thought about them, like
Mm,
if I really cared about them, or if I it was kind of the opposite of my experience with Ryan, where I was like, I don't want to rush this. I
yeah.
wouldn't say I rushed things afterwards, but I was more willing to be open early. And, you know, with my previous awareness from other relationships of like, I'm not going to rush in, but also not denying myself how I felt about things. And like, if I was called towards something that felt true and not compulsive, to like just go for it more. I think I allowed myself more freedom in my choices. And the first way it showed up was, yeah, just in expressing my love for people. Because I don't think we're super great at doing that all the time. And then all of a sudden somebody's gone and you're like, well,
I didn't
frick,
do
there
it.
goes I
Yeah.
didn't do it. Yeah. So
Yeah.
that was one. I definitely think, you know, there was times when I had some scary experiences with skiing, and I was like, just realized, oh, actually death is much closer than we think it is. And is skiing something I still want to do? You know, so
Yeah.
there was a few times like right after he died, I was inspecting this. I was at the next competition. I was on top of this cliff, kind of looking over the edge, trying to get a feel for the landing. And my tip caught and I fell off of it head first. And I was like stuck upside down under the snow. And this is like, I don't know, 3 weeks after he died. And I was like kind of buried under there, but I was able to like work my hands up and get myself an airway and kind of wriggle out, but it really scared me.
Yeah.
And I also really hurt my neck. It was like pretty locked up for the next few weeks. And I was like, really? Like, is this what I want to be doing? That's probably the first moment, but just those brushes where you're like, you realize that at any point, this could all just be taken away. And so
Yeah.
there's just these moments where you're like, is this worth it? Is this worth it?
Mm-hmm.
Or sometimes I started working with a life coach. She doesn't call herself a life coach. She actually hates that term. She calls herself a Coke inspirer, and she's amazing. Like helping you dream up, you know, the life that it is you want to live.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I just started working with her and being like, it was a while after that, but it was really just in that question of like, how do I want to live? And Ryan really had me starting to ask myself that question deeply, regularly. And then when I started working with this woman, it was like Kim Dawson just opened so much up in being like, I want to learn how to sail. That's why I'm sailing now. I decided I wanted to go to Peru. I went to Peru. I'd never traveled solo before. I really started just doing things for myself for no reason. And I was like, oh, right, this is what life is about. Like, this is why we have those little desires in our hearts. We're like, well, that doesn't make sense. Like, why would I do that? I started actually trying to figure out how to do that. And I couldn't figure out how to do it because I'd never done it in my life before. It'd always been very structured with skiing and stuff. And so my workaround was like, no, I want to figure out how to do that. So I started working with this woman.
Yeah. Okay. Those are good examples of not taking things for granted. It sounds like, you know, in your relationships or just the opportunity to pursue experiences while you can, you know, because they may not always be available to you. And so now let's flip it on its head a little bit. And you've experienced all this and learned and grown and changed, and somebody's in the middle of a hard season right now. What advice would you give them? And I don't know what the season is, but they're in it right now. Like, what advice would you give them?
Well, I try and remember to tell myself this every time I'm in the middle of a hard season. It doesn't always make it better, but sometimes like it's helpful to know or to remember that even if it feels like the worst, the longest dark chapter of your life, it is not going to last forever. And just like the small steps, even if it's just making it through the day, will get you there. Like you will come out of this. And I think of the Shakespeare gave the analogy of life is like a wheel, and sometimes you're at the bottom and sometimes at the top you're at the top, but it's always moving, it's always rolling around. And so
that's good.
And so I just think of that wheel a lot when I'm in the dark place. And also sometimes it doesn't make it better, but sometimes it makes it more bearable to remember that sometimes we have to have those hard experiences. Like they're part of the contrast of life. And when I try to rush them or to like just be like, it like go away, I just want to make this go away, I almost feel like they take longer. And when I'm like, okay, I guess this is what I'm supposed to be experiencing this right now, and it really sucks and it's not going to last forever, and I'm going to try and surrender to just being here for it, like just fully being here for the absolute worst. Like I'm here for it and it sucks. That's what I've used to get through, but it's going to get better. And also at those times it's really hard to reach out or to see a way through, but I've always found like a little lifeline through friends, even if it's like going to a movie or going on a close trip with friends somewhere. Like that community has been really important for me. So
Yeah.
whoever is in that.
Yeah. What were you gonna say? Oh no, finish your thought.
I was just gonna say, if anyone's resonating with this, anyone listening, like, I understand, I have been there, and it's really hard, and you're gonna make it. Yeah.
Did you find that to experience the benefit of those friends or the people when you needed the lifeline, that to fully receive like the support, you had to be vulnerable and let them know, or did you just need their presence? Like, did you need them to know everything that you were feeling, or did you just need them to be with you?
Sometimes both. Yeah. I think it really depended on the phase that I was in. Sometimes just the mood I was in, the person also. Like, I'm pretty comfortable being vulnerable, but sometimes even when you're in there, like, you don't even know what you're feeling. You're like, I don't even have the words for it. Like, I just need help, or I just need some love. And so, yeah.
Wow. I appreciate your perspective. You've been through some difficult things, and I think it is for someone like me who hasn't experienced death in that way, or, you know, even like such a significant identity shift, like, it's so helpful to hear that, one, it's, you know, it's going to come and it will end. And two, that like, look, there are things available as a result. And like, it just gives me hope that like, I don't have to fear those seasons when they come.
Yeah, exactly. And those seasons, you know, the good ones never last long enough, and the hard ones always last too long, you know, like, we always want the answers or want things to be better, like, right away. And they always take longer than we want. But I also believe in that, or at least what I tell myself when I'm having one of those moments is, life never gives us more than we can handle. And sometimes I'm like, I can't take this. And I'm like, no, actually I can, because in this moment I can take it. And in this next moment I can take it. But
one moment at a time.
Yeah.
That's good. So I like to finish the conversation with a question. I didn't prep you for this, so sorry. But I think that difficult seasons, like the wheel, like it spins, you're not like, you check it off the list and you're done with that season forever. Like, hard things come up regularly. So I like to finish these conversations with this question. What's a hard thing that you're in the middle of right now?
Reimagining my life, like, again.
Again.
You know, again. Well, you know, I quit skiing. That was really hard to do. I walked away from a bunch of sponsorships when I was in the middle of them, you know. So that was tough, but, you know, I fully sent it into sailboat, live aboard life, which was really amazing. And now I'm again being like, my body doesn't love this live aboard lifestyle 24/7. Like, I'm depleted. Like, I actually doesn't work great for my constitution, but I don't know how to do it again. And even just, you know, anyways, there's a whole, I wish I could press fast forward on this chapter right now, because I have a lot of questions I don't have the answers to. My body doesn't feel great. I'm really depleted, and we have to go back and, you know, work on the boat in this super, super challenging spot. That's really hard on the body. And I don't know, like, how I'm gonna get out of it.
Mentally psyching yourself up for that.
Yeah. And also, like, I got to figure out where I'm gonna live. And, you know, it's all questions that, like, they're not like crazy big questions, but also, like, I have to start making money again. And it's all just a lot more questions that I, like, have ideas for, but I don't have the answers for. And it's gonna take months before I sort of even have anything in place that feels solid. And that feels like a really long time away when you're tired. So I'm just kind of in the middle of that right now, of another phase of, like, not knowing, but kind of needing to be able to figure it out.
The squirmy part.
I'm back in the squirmy part. I'm like, gosh, the non-squirmy part didn't last that long.
No. Well, I mean, I'm sure you've reminded yourself of this, but, like, it'll pass, right? So and I'm sure, like, somebody like yourself who's accomplished a lot we'll find something to accomplish. I'm sure. Like, it's just, you're wired that way at that point. If you have that kind of drive to like reach the level of the craft that you did, like, I think you're set up for success. So I'm excited to see what the next chapter will be for you.
Thanks.
Yeah, well, and thank you for hopping on and sharing a lot of, that story and being willing to share the details too. I think it's way more powerful that way for people to hear them. And for maybe for somebody who resonated with something you said, or just has questions about like the stories or how to process something, that is there a way that people can follow you and your story and what you're doing, or connect with you?
I would say Instagram is the best way right now. Yeah,
Okay.
just at Angel Collinson is the best.
Okay, yeah. I'll drop that in the show notes for people so they can reference that and they can shoot you a DM and either just say, hey, thanks for sharing your story, or ask you some questions. So anyways, Angel, super thankful that you were willing to spend some time. This was awesome.
Yeah, thanks so much for this. I just love conversations like this, and I love this topic, and just thanks for like holding this space for all of these conversations for everybody. Like, really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely.